Welcome back to another episode of the Bleav Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts, Jackson Caldell, RJ Schaefer, coming to you. We're recording on Monday evening. We are 1 week away from Georgia Tech starting spring practice. But first of all, RJ, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. We had some technical difficulties that lasted a while before we got on here, but ready to talk some ball.
This is how you know. We'll see. You still have a bright future. I was not smart enough to get into Georgia Tech, so I was not on the technical aspect of this and able to figure it out. So you can definitely tell my education's running a little bit behind where we were having technical issues. But yeah, it's been a little bit. We haven't been back since Miami, or since Georgia Tech beat Miami, excuse me. And when we did that, baseball also looked good. Now I should say they look, it looks kind of too familiar. We'll just kind of quit. Of course, this is our spring football preview. That's what the title says. We're going to dig into that, give you an in-depth spring football preview as we can. We're also going to touch a little bit on the other sports here. Basketball's winding down. Baseball's kind of getting going, but they're kind of in a weird spot after that Georgia series. But I guess right off the top, basketball had a week off. That's the first time that's happened, at least in ACC play this year that I can remember. So we didn't have any instant reaction shows to get to, but that was maybe there. I know that like the wins against North Carolina and Duke were bigger. That was probably the most like start to finish, just consistent effort. Like it wasn't Georgia Tech got up ahead. They had to scramble to get the win like that because, they didn't score in the final 7 minutes against Miami. Like they kind of had to hold on for dear life. And it wasn't like a big comeback either. Like they just consistently stayed ahead of Florida State pretty much the whole time. It was nice to see Kyle Sturdivant get sent out on senior day. He had a big game. Brian Dongo had a double-double. It was just a really good all-around game. And now, hey, look, they've won 3 of 4. I don't know what that means. They beat Syracuse, Miami, and Florida State. They're going to finish with 2 tough road games. They play Wake Forest tomorrow. I don't need to – me or RJ don't need to tell you the podcast we recorded the last time they played Wake Forest. We were kind of at a loss for words when that happened. Yeah. And then Virginia's been lucky if they can score 50 points in games lately. Like they've looked terrible, but you never know. Any quick thoughts on basketball?
This was just kind of a step in another direction. I don't want to say step in the right direction.
Don't get carried away.
But mostly when Miles Kelly struggles, like the team struggles, so many times in ACC play this year, Miles Kelly will struggle. The team will shoot 33% from the field. But I mean, Miles Kelly struggled today. Kyle Sturdivant stepped up. Brian Dongo, as you said, stepped up. Nate George again. I just think this was the most cohesive win of the year. Like everybody contributed, no matter what.
Yeah, and the defense was pretty solid for most of the game. Like halfway through the first half, like the final 10 minutes of the first half, Florida State kind of went on a flurry of a run. Like they started scoring points in bunches because Florida State got off to a really slow start on offense. But man, the defense for Georgia Tech really stepped up in the second half. Now they've already clinched a spot in the bottom 6. Like they're going to have to play in the first round of the ACC tournament. Right now, they did move up a spot because Miami didn't play the other day, and Tech beat Miami, obviously, so they hold the tiebreaker over them. So right now, Georgia Tech's in 13th place. I'd have to go back and look at the standings and kind of see who's in front of who, but I think there's a chance maybe they can move up to 11 or 12. But remember, they lost both games to Notre Dame and they lost to Boston College. So I don't know that that's going to happen. They're probably going to be locked into that 13, 14 spot, depending on what happens this week and, how Miami finishes the season. So right now they would have to play Boston College in the first round. And if they won that game, then they would have to play Pitt. We'll see what happens there. They should have beat Boston College the first time. They blew a 16-point lead in that game. I think we all remember that one. And then the Pitt game was pretty close. Pitt's kind of hot right now. They're trying, and they're also trying to make the ACC or not the ACC. The NCAA tournament. They're going to need every win they can, so that they're going to be ready to play if that happens. But again, me and RJ will break down the ACC tournament bracket at some point when it gets released after this weekend. But I guess let's get to the painful part of the weekend. So the first game, there was a big baseball series. Me and you talked about it. It was going to start on Friday. Georgia Tech was 7-1 coming in it. We thought that, this was a chance to show that things were a little different than the past few years. Like, the pitching was going to step up and be ready in the big moment. The offense is going to do what it always does. The offense was okay at times. I guess I'll start with the first game. The first game personally should not have been played. Like the conditions were just bad all day around. I was surprised they gave that a go. It was 9-3 in the bottom of the fifth inning when they or the middle of the fifth, and they were heading to the bottom of the fifth inning when they paused the game. Cam Hill, it was not going well for him. The offense also, Drew Burris did hit another home run. It actually doesn't officially count because they didn't finish the game, but he started off well. That was kind of the highlight of the weekend for him, honestly. Then they lose 3-1 Saturday. Aiden Vinatieri pitched a really good game. Offense was a complete no-show outside of a Parker Brocious home run. Like that was about it. And then yesterday, Tech had a 9-3 lead in the seventh inning and lost. And it didn't even go to extra innings. Like they just gave up 8 runs in the last 3 innings. That is just unbelievably bad. It was just I thought Cam Jones was going to save the day there for a second, and kind of like he did against Georgia Southern. But any big takeaways from this? This was just it felt just way too familiar. Just felt like the past few years, and like the pitching's just not going to be up to par to get Tech where they want to be.
Yeah, and the starting pitching has been pretty good throughout the year.
Yeah, I should clarify. It's mostly been the bullpen. Like Logan McGuire was really good yesterday.
Yeah, and it's kind of been like past years where you'll have some great starting pitching and then like a middling bullpen, and it's the same story over again. One thing to take away from this is I wouldn't be shocked if this is Danny Hall's last year as skipper, because, again, it's kind of the same story that we have years past. And granted, the offense is a lot better this year. I will say that.
Yeah. I'll say this. I'll wait on that a little bit. I get that sentiment totally. I'm not saying people shouldn't or not allowed to feel that way or anything. It's just so early in the season. Like there is always the chance that things do get turned around. And Georgia's very good. Georgia's lineup 1 through 9 is really good. I'll say that I get where that sentiment comes from. I'm not really in the position of saying that, but it's frustrating just to see the same result. I mean, it's like Groundhog Day. It's just kind of the same thing, not being able to, this was the first true test of the year. Me and you both think Cornell's a pretty decent baseball team, but like they're not on the level of Georgia. And I mean, really, Tech blew that game yesterday. They could have easily won 2, and they were largely non-competitive in that first game, but They play Northeastern tomorrow, and then they have a home series against Youngstown State. We'll see how they bounce back. They need to just keep getting wins. They probably really won't have another test until they face NC State to open up ACC play here in a few weeks. So maybe things will get better. Just cross your fingers. All right, it's. We've been talking about so many other sports for so long, and me and RJ, we got the privilege to start this podcast towards the end of last season. So honestly, me and him have been talking way more about other sports than we have about football. But we are going to be giving our in-depth spring football preview today. We're going to go position by position, just kind of what we're looking for, what we're hoping to see. We get that you can only get so much out of spring practice. Obviously there's not going to be a lot of contact in practice. Quarterbacks aren't going to be hit. I mean, it's just it's like regular practice, and then you're going to have a spring game. Things are going to be very controlled, but at least on one side of the ball, there's at least a ton of intrigue. I've written about pretty much every position. Go check it out at allyellowjackets.com if you wish. But I guess let's start with the most important position on the field. And look, last year it was a total mystery who was going to start. Some people thought Zach Pyron. Some thought Haynes King was brought in to take the starting job. And look, they both had pretty solid springs, and then King waited till I think it was about August when he named Haynes King starting quarterback. Look, Haynes King was terrific last year. Definitely needs to cut down on the turnovers, but just pretty much you couldn't have expected a better season from him. He did a lot of things. He might be the best returning quarterback in the ACC this year. We might have that debate later on this podcast, but not now. I guess my intrigue, like it's going to sound kind of boring, but I guess I'm going to go with the freshman quarterbacks. I don't really know what you're going to see out of Haynes King that's going to like obviously, like I said, I want Haynes King to cut down on the interceptions and the turnovers. I don't know how you're really going to measure that in spring football. Like I hope he doesn't turn the ball over, but even if he doesn't really turn it over, like I don't know if he's going to be taking a ton of chances or anything. So Zach Pyron is pretty well entrenched in that number 2 spot. Like he's not going to be overtaken for that, just given his experience, and he's a very talented player that should be given the keys to the car once Haynes King is gone. But I think for Aaron Philo and Graham Knowles, both of those QBs enrolled early. I just kind of want to see how they handle it. Like it's their first extensive college practice. They get to play in the spring game next month. I guess for me, it's kind of seeing how they look early and how their skill sets are already translating to the next level. What about you?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's also important to think about during spring football is look at where we were last year compared to right now. Like we didn't know it was going to be, like you said, it was going to be Haynes King, Zach Pyron, Zach Gibson was in that conversation too, now gone. Um, and I think since the switch, I don't know, since the switch from the option to whatever you want to call it, spread, whatever offense we are now, there's been kind of a cycle of quarterbacks, but this is the first year it feels like in a while where you have a quarterback that you can lean on for multiple things like decision making. Obviously, there's a lot of turnovers, but he can go out and make plays on his own, and your quarterback play is not setting you back. I would say the same thing. I'm more interested in Aaron Philo as a quarterback out of the 2 freshmen, but also being very appreciative of Texas A&M for gifting us Haynes King.
Yeah. Thanking Jimbo Fisher. Like Jimbo Fisher was ruining him. And you see what happens when you actually get a competent OC and play caller with Buster Faulkner. And yeah, like it was. And the other thing, and goes for every position, just stay healthy. Like no injuries to any positions. Like that's just the last thing you want to see, especially in the spring. But yeah, like I know I'm sure everybody has that take for anybody that discusses Georgia Tech, but I just think it's just the simplest answer. Like King and Pyron are firmly entrenched 1 and 2. You got 2 intriguing freshmen coming in. I'm ready to see how they do, and I'm sure they'll get plenty of reps too. Like I think in the spring game, I'm sure Brent Key will want to give them plenty of reps because you didn't have that last year. Because remember they didn't take a QB in the 2023 class, and you were in there trying to have a QB competition. Like you want to give King, Pyron, and Gibson all those reps. So it was now you've got two new quarterbacks. I would be surprised if they take just a ton of reps whenever the spring game comes around, but we're a little ways from that. We'll get into that later, but I guess just moving it along on the offensive side of the ball, running back, it's another position where there's a clear cut guy, and it's again you look back to last year. If you'd have told me last year Jamal Haynes would have ran for nearly 1,100 yards and it was 3rd team All ACC running back. Remember, he was a wide receiver at this point last year. He flipped over there to the running back side during the fall. So, look, he'll be firmly entrenched as a number 1 again. Just stay healthy. He's already a pretty dynamic back. Like he catches the ball out of the backfield as well. You can line him up, like you can see the receiver skills there. Is a pretty decent blocker for his size. Like again, I just want to see him stay healthy and just keep progressing. Like it was in his first year as a starter, he's already hitting 3rd team All ACC and getting 1,100 yards. So now you get a full spring working at running back and a full off season working at that position. Love to see it. I think replacing Dante Smith, who was dinged up a little bit at the start of last year because Trey Cooley was the number 2 back for those first few games. He had a 2 big touchdown runs against Louisville, had a pretty solid game against South Carolina State, and then just kind of slowly just faded away from the lineup. I'm assuming he'll be the number 2 back. He's got the most experience both playing and this is his last year, so we'll see what happens there. But also you've got a redshirt freshman, Evan Dickens. He played a little bit. He got a few carries last year. He was a talented 2023 recruit. Obviously, you got 4-star running back Anthony Carey on signing day. We'll see what he's capable of. I'm just kind of seeing how things shake out behind Jamal Haynes. Like, is Trey Cooley going to be that number 2 guy, or is it going to be somebody else?
Yeah, and I think it'll be more of in spring and in the start of fall. I think it'll be more of a revolving door to see who gets more reps. I think obviously Cooley will get, some more important touches than younger players than um, Evan Dickens, than Anthony Carey or Anthony Carey, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, again, just interested to see kind of the change in what Trey Cooley has done in the offseason. Um, Obviously, losing Dante Smith is a big thing, but I think you're kind of all set at the two position.
yeah, and I mean a couple of the names I'll mention: Trelane Maddox, he was a true freshman, played at Parkview High School, talented kid. Again, true freshman coming in at running back, it can be a little difficult. We'll see how he does. And remember, Jamie Felix did enter the transfer portal, but he came back. He got a decent bit of playing time down the stretch of the 2022 season. He didn't play at all last year. I'm kind of anxious to see, if he can maybe even challenge for one of those top positions behind Haynes. But there's I think, just a lot of intrigue on what goes on behind him, and we'll start to see that carry on a little bit through the spring. Anything else for running back?
Mm-mm.
All right. Wide receiver got a little bit more interesting over the past couple weeks. Josh Crawford, Georgia Tech's wide receivers coach last year, left. He's going to coach the running backs at UGA. He's not going to be the wide receivers coach. He's going to be the running backs coach, which left an open slot on the coaching staff. And, Brinke was going to have to fill this pretty quickly, and I think he did a pretty good job. Trent McKnight, who's been the offense coordinator for Georgia State the past few seasons, and he was also the wide receivers coach previously, he is going to be taking over those responsibilities. You get somebody who has coached the position before and also been a play caller for some pretty good offenses the past few years. Now, look, I say this every time somebody's hired, whether it's head coach, position coach, whatever. There are no obvious grand slams. Like, for various reasons, different coaching things can go wrong. I mean, you can point to several coaches that get hired where you think it's a grand slam and it just never turns out well. So I always play the wait and see card. This does seem like a pretty sensible hire. You're getting somebody that's coached in the state before, who's recruited in the state. He's coached his position and coached it well, directed some pretty good offenses. So you're going to have that on top of the wide receiver position. But I think the most interesting thing about the wide receivers, because Georgia Tech is bringing pretty much everybody back, but Dominic Blaylock, who opted to enter the NFL draft, is does Leo Blackburn practice a lot? Like, well, there hasn't been an update on him in quite a while. I think it was maybe the bowl game practice when Brinke was asked about how he's doing, and said he was progressing pretty well, but he was obviously never going to play in that game. He tore his ACL at the start of last April. It's been 12 months. I'm really interested to see, what he does. Hopefully he can get out there and do stuff. Unfortunately, as physically gifted as he is, he's been plagued by injuries during his time at Tech, and it's been unfortunate because he's a great kid, a really talented football player as well. So I'm kind of, because if he is fully healthy and is able to do stuff, like, again, you're just adding to your receiver room and making it better. We can talk. Eric Singleton was a beast last year. He's the clear cut number one guy. Christian Leary's back. Malik Rutherford's back. Abdul Janai's back. You've also
Avery
got,
Boyd's back.
yes, Avery Boyd is back. You've also got two freshmen coming in, Isaiah Canyon and Trey Horn, who I'm really high on from the 2024 class. Canyon was one of the Tech's 4-stars this year. Trey Horn was kind of an under the radar guy over at Raven Gap. He was classified as an athlete. He kind of did he was an athlete. He did a lot of everything. He ran the ball, caught the ball. He even threw some touchdowns at Raven Gap last year. Super talented kid. Again, when you already have established guys at a position, it's tough for true freshmen to break in. So we'll see how that goes. But again, you can just you have to play the most talented guys. It doesn't matter whether they're freshmen, redshirt seniors. It just doesn't matter. You play the best players. So yeah, I'm looking to see how Blackburn looks out there. And again, there's always intrigue with the young players and just seeing how much better these guys have gotten, because Singleton, that was his first full college season last year. You're already seeing how good he can be. Blaylock was pretty good at times last year. I wouldn't call him irreplaceable. He was a good player, but it's just nice to have consistency in the room.
Yeah, and I think again what we talked about with the quarterback room, like this is one of the most consistent, most reliable wide receiver rooms there's been in a while. Um, Eric Singleton, I think, with the right development and hopefully no wrong turns, like I think Eric Singleton can really be one of the top receivers in the ACC, and he might already be that. You can argue, and then you have a ton of freshmen. Canyon, who was according to 247, he was the highest rated recruit out of the entire class. Really interested to see what he can do. He'll definitely get some reps in the spring game. Just a ton of guys that are coming in and out, or coming in, not out, and just interested to see what we can do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think both Malik Rutherford and Christian Leary are slot players for the most part. So that outside spot that Blaylock played a lot down the stretch last year, that's kind of your open void there. Now you would maybe like to see Blackburn get in there and take a shot. Abdul could get in there and take it. He played some last year, had some. Yeah, I think he had like a 38, 34. It was a long catch against Louisville last year. He kind of did some. He had some moments in games. He just wasn't on the field consistently enough, but look, and you also got guys like Zion Taylor, James Blackstrain. There's a lot of talent in this room and some young talent as well. So it's a nice mixture of experience, bringing in some intriguing young players that could make you even better if they're as good as advertised right away. Like it's just everybody likes having like a number one dominant receiver, and I think you have that in Eric Singleton. And we'll just see how they can surround him with it. But I said keep a watch on that outside receiver position because Rutherford and Leary are both great in their own ways, but just their body types and their skill sets, they're more slot receivers than anything. So we'll kind of see how they move the chess pieces around there. The tight end position, it kind of from a receiving standpoint, like Tech's tight ends have just not done much in the past few years. Dylan Leonard. Now he was loved. Like he was a great locker room guy. He blocked his tail off. Like he did a lot of really good things on and off the field. He's gone. Luke Benson, who was a transfer from Syracuse, played his last couple of years at Georgia Tech. He did some things well, but he's gone. So now you've got Brett Seither is really the only guy returning that did anything last year, and he was whenever he caught the ball, he did something because he caught the very first touchdown of the year for Tech against Louisville. He had that big touchdown. He had like two touchdowns, I think, against North Carolina because he caught a really deep one, I think, or a really deep pass, and he caught the go-ahead touchdown there at the end of the game. He also had a big catch against Georgia. Like whenever he was making catches, like something good was happening. Now I assume he's going to step into the starting role, but I don't think you're going to have a tight end play like all the snaps. Like you're not going to have one guy just dominating theirs. You're going to have one guy that can do something. They took two transfers as well. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Rylan Goday from Mississippi State and Georgia. If I'm not pronouncing that right, I apologize. But you also have Jackson Halls from Yale. Both those guys do different things. Ryland's only caught one pass in his career. He's mostly been on the field as a blocker, both at Georgia and Mississippi State. It's easy to just look at that and assume he's just going to step in and be the blocker. But there's catches available there. It's hard to really get on the field a ton in two tight end sets at Tech right now, just with all the receiver talent there is. But they took two tight ends for a reason. Jackson Long, he was a freshman last year, transferred over from USF, didn't play. I'm interested to see maybe if he can get on the field this year. Luke Harpering is going to play tight end for Georgia Tech, and I think he's one of the most talented recruits in the 2024 class. He's not an early enrollee, so he's not participating in spring. So we're going to have to wait a little bit to see that. I just think it's going to be about finding guys and what role they fit in. Like, how is somebody going to be the blocking tight end? Is somebody going to be good in this package? Like, it's just finding the different pieces, putting them where they fit, and just making it a good thing for the offense.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this when we did our transfer portal recap podcast. I think Jackson Hawes, or Hawes, how you say it, I think he's going to be one of the biggest impact players on offense from a transfer standpoint. I like what he did at Yale. Obviously, I'm not an Ivy League aficionado. I saw some games. Um, I think he can be vertical. I think he can be a blocker. I'm really interested to see what he can do in spring because I would not be shocked if at the start of the year he's getting a lot of reps at tight end. And I think he deserves that.
Yeah, it should also be mentioned that the other tight end recruit that Tech had, David Prince from Glenn Academy, he's also not an early enrollee, so you don't have freshmen at this position coming in, so you don't get to see those guys. Look, when Harper gets in there, um, I think Tech could play as many as all five of those tight ends. I think Prince is the only one I don't know that he's going to get on the field. I think it's going to take him a little time to develop, and I'm not saying he's not talented. I just think some guys it's just going to take a few years to get in there. But man, I don't really have a good feel on this position, and I wrote about it today. I said it's one of the three most intriguing position battles I think in the spring. Just seeing who's doing what, when Tech's running the ball, who's coming in here. Like I'm assuming Scyther's going to be kind of used in the same fashion. He was pretty good off play action last year. That's when he did a lot of his damage. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't think you have 800, 900 yard receiving yards tight ends. Like I just don't think you're not gonna have somebody that has like 55 catches and is just a dominant force. But I think you have some guys that in certain situations can do some things well, and we'll see. Man, you want to talk about a position? We could say this almost at a lot of positions for Tech. Just oh man, look back last year where we were. But man, the offensive line, they were returning everybody. But the question you had to ask yourself was, okay, is that good experience or is that just bad players that played a lot of snaps? Because in 2022, Tech had arguably the worst offensive line, at least in the Power Five, if not the country. Like it was bad in every metric. Then a year later, they helped lead the ACC in rushing. They were top 30 in sacks allowed. Like it was just a complete 180 from a year ago. They are missing one starter, Connor Scaglione. Um, he is gone. He is out of eligibility, and we'll see we'll see. Keelan Rutledge is probably going to replace him, the MTSU transfer, but we'll just kind of have to see what happens. Now, the rest of the starters are back. You've got both Ethan McKinney and Corey Robinson at offensive tackle. You've got Joe Fusile at left guard. You've got Weston Franklin at center. And you've got Jordan Williams at right tackle. All four of those players were pretty good last year. McKinney did have some freshman struggles, but he was one of the better just as a true freshman offensive tackles. It's hard to step into that position and be consistent week to week. And he definitely had some high moments. I mean, he got in the first game against Louisville, and he made plenty of starts from there on. Fusile and Franklin were you could see it right away. Like, I know not everybody puts a ton of stock into some PFF grades because of how inconsistent they are, but I do think it's worth noting. Like they graded out immediately really well, especially in run blocking. And like that was just huge. Like again, Tech led the ACC in rushing last season, and they very well could do it again. So we'll see. I think, like we've been talking about for the first few positions, I think the depth is going to be key here. Like I said, Corey Robinson is back. You had some guys exit, like Paul Teo transferred out. You had some Jakai left, which he transferred out. So you have some young players here, and I just kind of want to see how the rotation is and how things work out. Like, okay, what could some of these freshmen be like? Jamison Riggs, Harrison Moore, Jordan Floyd, those guys, like how do they look? Patrick Screws was a really both figuratively and literally a big recruit. And okay, where is he at now? We didn't see Jordan Brown, who last year who was a transfer from Charlotte, and some other freshmen, Gabe Forts and Benjamin Galloway. Like those guys, it's going to be interesting to see how they come in and possibly. I want to see how the depth chart shakes out on the offensive line. What about you?
Yeah, I'm interested because mm, offensive line is one of the most strong units on the team. Kind of Brent Key has put a focus on the offensive line kind of being the identity of the team. Keelan Rutledge, who's going to be an impact transfer, was all. Um, a ton of freshmen and a ton of guys who didn't get a ton of looks last year who are very talented, like Jordan Brown. Um, you got Brandon Best, another interior lineman. I'm just really interested to see how it shakes out. I think Keelan Rutledge will actually probably start.
Yeah, like
Um,
that's like probably the easiest call. Like you know,
yeah,
he's played, he was an all conference member. You know, you're kind of looking to bridge the gap. You've got young, talented freshmen coming in this year. You're letting those young, talented guys in 2023, you know, get another year of experience and depth because as you know, as good as McKinney played last year, you know, you don't want to be throwing true freshman offensive tackles out there in, you know, I guess it's not power five anymore, it's power four, but you don't want to be throwing them out there in those situations if you don't have to. So letting them sit, you know, hit the strength and conditioning, just improve their bodies and get ready to play that, you know, that's I'm assuming Rutledge is like that kind of bridge guy.
yeah. And Rutledge is he's only a junior, so he has one more year
Mhm.
of eligibility after this year. I think the only seniors we graduate this year is Weston Franklin, uh, and the Jordan Williams at right tackle. Um, so really a lot to in this group. I think there will be not a set lineup. Like I imagine it won't just be the same guys. Like I imagine Jordan Brown's going to get a lot of looks.
Yeah,
But I'm a huge fan of Keelan Rutledge.
yeah. Like I mean, I think the starting five's pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah.
I just think the depth is going to be where it's okay. You know, if somebody goes down, you know, you're going to be playing guys that probably haven't played before. That's the thing. That's where you know you never want injuries at any position, but offensive line is one of the ones I think they can least afford it probably, just because you just have unproven guys. All right. We talked about the good side of the ball for Georgia Tech last year. I guess let's talk about the side that we need to see. Completely different coaching staff. We're going to start with the defensive line here, but I guess just kind of just okay. Go ahead, look back. Tyler Santucci was brought in. He was Duke's defensive coordinator the past few seasons. He's also going to coach inside linebackers. Jess Simpson, who was at Duke, he's also coached at Miami and for the Atlanta Falcons previously. He's been a good and he's been a good defensive line coach. He had Kyle Pope coming over from Memphis. He's going to coach outside linebackers. And then you got Corey Peoples and Ricky Brumfield coaching in the secondary. Brumfield also coaches the special teams. So it's just a completely different look on defense. When you look at the defensive line, like go back and look at the stats, like there's a lot of the top sack guys are gone. Like Kyle Kennard is gone. Like the top guy coming back with a sack was Kevin Harris, and he had one. So, you know, if whatever way you want to start with it, whether it's defensive tackle, edge, you know, I'm just going, you know, kind of looking at the edge guys. You know, you got Kevin Harris, Josh Robinson. I don't know how much Sylvain Yonderwin's going to do this spring. You know, he tore his ACL in the Louisville game, and that was 7 months ago. Like I'm not a doctor. Obviously, you know, we'll wait and see. His medical updates and Leo Blackburn's medical updates are going to be two of the biggest pieces of news you get at the start of spring practice. He's playing a ton of football for Georgia Tech. You hated to see him go down with an injury, but if he can come back healthy, he gives you an experienced guy at least. Eddie Kelly was a young guy last year after coming over from USF. He played plenty, had some ups and downs, never really got consistent. We'll see what happens there. And then you got Jack Barton, the transfer from Furman, and Jordan Boyd, the freshman, who I think was one of the more under the radar guys as well. Like I actually thought several of them were. And then they've got some guys coming in the summer. Montre Bradford, who was one of the big signing day flips from Colorado. He's not an early enrollee, so we'll have to wait to see him. But man, it's just going to be interesting to see a new scheme being implemented and new guys having to step up. And I know everybody talks about the pass rush with the defensive ends, but I mean it's one of the most crucial parts of the game.
Yeah, and this is one of the positions where there's not a lot of tools. I know it's not the right word. Like there's so much room for movement is what I was trying to get at. Um, a lot of guys that had some reps. in pass rush. Not really a ton of the performance comes back from last year. I'm a big fan of Ao Tafase, the
Mhm.
for um, I think you have guys on the edge that can do it too. I think Eddie Kelly's great. Uh, I'm just kind of interested to see how that all shakes out because there's no clear number one guy.
That was like when I was making out the depth chart for this. I just you could put or after everyone like Kevin Harris or Sylvain or Josh Robinson or Eddie Kelly. I wouldn't, Jack Barton has plenty of experience at Furman. I like you can't rule him coming out and just getting snaps immediately. Like I said, I think Jordan Boyd's really talented. Now he's a true freshman, so you're gonna have to be patient there. But he's also in spring practice. Defensive tackle, the interior is kind of where I feel more certain about who's going to get the snaps. Like Zeke Biggers, like I know he's going to get plenty of snaps. Like, and now these guys need to be better because you're not downing on players or anything, but this was by far the worst rushing defense in the ACC. It was arguably one of the worst in the countries, and like you can just look, you can go back to the Georgia game, and when they had to get a stop after scoring that touchdown to cut it to a game, and it was 3rd and 9, and you're thinking, okay, is Georgia going to pass here? They sit there and run it and got it like that. That was kind of just a summary of the problems that Georgia Tech had was just giving up a 3rd and long, just running a simple inside zone and getting it. So Horace Lockett's a guy that I'm excited about. He is a huge human being, and he's a young guy. He's going to keep improving, I think. I hope he can keep getting better there at least. Makai Scott is a guy that's played plenty. Shy Meek Jones, 6'5", 283. He redshirted last year. He was a guy I know they were excited about coming in. A lot of those freshman defensive linemen from the 2023 class wound up transferring out this past transfer portal cycle. But defensive tackle in the interior, and I'll say this, Makai Scott also played edge a little bit last year because they were just trying to find some things that worked. Like they just could not get a consistent pass rush and consistent play from that side, so he slid over there. But like Biggers, Lockett, and Makai Scott, like those, you have pretty good experience and talent there. And then you got some young guys coming in the summer as well.
Yeah, and I think again that's where Ao Tafase comes in.
Right.
Um, I think Scott will actually play more off the edge again this year
I can see it, yeah.
than as a traditional tackle. Uh, I think Lockett is not only is he one of the best talent wise, he's one of the most physical on the line, like by far one of the most physical. Um, and I think a lot of younger guys can rally upon that. I'm really excited to see, um, not really where this shakes out in camp because I think at edge you have a lot more variability. I'm just more interested in seeing what's the new identity of this defense because you have overhauled
Yeah.
literally everything, and I think line is one of the most important.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're going to get thrown right into the fire when the season starts. A really good offensive team like Florida State, like your defense is going to have to come correct. You know, it's part of the schedule being tough is why Georgia Tech's win total is at 5.5 right now. But it's also just the uncertainty with the defense because if the especially the front seven, if the front seven and the defense as a whole is that bad again, it's going to be tough to get back to a bowl game. Like that's cut and dry as I can put it. If you show look, you're not going to go from being in the 120s in the rush defense and being down in a lot of categories like they are to all of a sudden you're top 15. Like I do not expect that at all. But you've got to be around average to win some of these games with just how hard the schedule is. Like they just cannot afford to have a run defense like they did last year. But it's not all on the defensive line either. Do you have any more thoughts on the defensive line before we move to linebackers?
Mm.
It's an incredibly important position. Like they've got to find difference makers up front, or
Yeah.
else it's just going to be tough to win games. Linebackers. So there's plenty of guys leaving. Paul Moala is leaving. Braylon Oliver's leaving. Andre White's leaving. They had freshman Ashton Heflin. He transferred. He was a guy I liked coming out of high school. And former Georgia Tech linebackers coach Jason Seymour is the defense coordinator over there. So it wasn't surprising to see him go to Marshall. But Kyle Ephraim, the way he came on towards about the middle of last year. Finished. He was the leading tackler for the Yellow Jackets last year. He's back. I think you can safely pencil him in. And then it's about finding just who that other guy is. It could be they brought two transfers in: Jackson Hamilton from Louisville, EJ Lightsey from Georgia. Lightsey's had a problem with injuries. Now he's a talented guy, but he's just not been able to stay on the field a lot of the time. Jacob Cruz is a guy I've talked about on this podcast as somebody I'm really excited for as a young guy. Nakari Ashley is another young guy to keep an eye on. He redshirted last year, but I think, I'll be interested to see what he does this spring. And you do have an experienced guy coming back in Trinelius Tatum, who did enter the transfer portal but opted to come back. He's a talented guy. He's had his ups and downs. He's not really been the most consistent player, but he does bring experience, if nothing else. It's just kind of finding about who's that, how many. One, I'm interested to see how many linebackers Santucci's going to play on the field because only two played last year. Like they ran a lot of 5 DB sets last year and only played two linebackers. It was kind of a revolving door. It was mostly Moala and Eford down the stretch, but Andre White and Braylon Oliver got more snaps too, but those guys were gone. So it's just about finding the depth pieces as well as who's going to be on the field with Eford, in my opinion. Like and what kind of impact can those transfers make?
Yeah, and I wrote this down in my notes beforehand. I think Eford is the impact player this season on offense or on defense. Eford kind of came out of nowhere, middle to the end of last season. Was an absolute beast on defense. Was anything really on run defense or rush defense that you could hang your hat on. He was great. Trinelius Tatum, another experienced guy. I'm kind of interested because I, granted, do not know a lot about Santucci. We talked about him a little bit. But I imagine, like you said, I think it'll be more 3 linebacker sets, less DBs out there. And I'm kind of interested to see what it looks like with Kyle Eford. Like Kyle Eford is your center. I just want to see what surrounds him.
Yeah, like having him play as well as he did towards the end of last year and just racking up all the tackles. He had a really good game against Georgia and a really good bowl game too. Like that was encouraging to see because if he didn't, we would be going into this spring like, okay, you got to find some impact players. But at least I can pinpoint one guy who has made impact plays and who I think is gradually improving. And it's just about finding another one because again, who the difference makers are on the offensive side of the football for Georgia Tech. You just don't know a lot of the defensive ones, especially in the front seven. Some guys in the secondary have made plays before, and we're about to get to them in just a second. But the front seven has got to find some difference makers. And look, I'm not saying All-Americans, first-round picks, but they've just got to find guys that make impact plays because they just didn't have them last year. Those were just few and far between. So the front seven is the most crucial part of this team going into the spring and probably the season. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I like what you said about Jacob Cruz. I think Jacob Cruz is also a guy that could be getting a lot more downs than people see.
Yep. All right. Let's wrap up the defense. We'll talk about the secondary. So at corner, there are some losses there, like Miles Sims, who played for a long time and did some good things. He is out of eligibility. Kenan Johnson transferred to Utah. KJ Wallace, the starting nickel, transferred to UCLA. Amari Harvey, who really started to come on towards the end of last year. I know I've said that about some guys, but I think he was named to like the AP All Bowl team or something like that. He had a really good game against UCF in short. But finding who plays next to him on the other side, because I think Amari Harvey is pretty well locked into one corner spot, but they bring in Warren Burrell from Tennessee, Saeed Gibbs from Rhode Island. And Gibbs was a guy I know a lot of schools were going after. Like I know West Virginia really wanted him. He had some other offers as well. Like if you're looking for a potential impact transfer, just like right off the bat, like that's probably where you can look. I think one of those two guys is going to be like highly in the mix. You also have Rodney Shelley, who could be at nickel. Sarad Bryant's another guy that transferred out. So Rodney Shelley is, I think, I guess it's not the easy answer because Omar Daniels can also the Kansas State transfer from last year, and he played a little bit, had some ups and downs. But I think either him or Shelley will wind up being the starting nickel. in those packages. DJ Moore, the former receiver, he is also converted to DB and playing corner. I guess it's again, it's you're just trying to find an impact guy alongside an already established guy like Amari Harvey. Like, I'm interested to see, in those five DV in those nickel packages, like, okay, is it Omar Daniels or Rodney Shelley, or is it somebody completely new? Does Warren Burrell go on the outside? Does Syed Gibbs? Like, both those guys that have good size, they're both 6 foot. Both Gibbs is 180, Burrell's 190, so they both have good size. It's not like they're light or anything. So I guess seeing how the two transfers do, and just I'm fairly certain Amari Harvey keeps the spotlight down, but we'll see how the depth shakes out at corner.
Yeah, and the position to watch in spring is definitely corner, because I think Syed Gibbs can take a lot of outside reps, uh, and I think Omar Daniels will be the guy at nickel. But again, this is another position where there is a huge opportunity to build. Syed Gibbs, probably one of the best transfers. Warren Burrell, also a great transfer.
Yep.
I think this is shaking out to be one of the best parts of the defense, like it was last year.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just throw a wild card in there. Stephen Jones Jr. is a redshirt freshman. He is super fast, and he's 6'1", 192. Like, if he can kind of put it together, like, he has the tools to be a good corner. Like, again, you brought in some experienced guys, which tells me that they may not like what they not saying not like, they may not believe what they have is ready to get on the field and play a ton of snaps. They may need another year to develop. So I assume Burrell and Gibbs are going to get the bulk of the reps on the outside, but like he's a guy just to circle and watch. It's just a guy that maybe he gets playing time later in the season because, again, he's super fast and he has the size as well. I guess let's wrap up the defensive talk with the safeties. Look, missing Jalen King is going to hurt from a leadership standpoint, and he was good last year. Like, yeah, he did a lot more, I think, than people gave him credit for. I know he wound up making the he was, I think, second team All ACC last season. LaMiles Brooks has a ton of talent. Obviously, Clayton Powell-Lee in his third year, those two guys are pretty firmly entrenched. I'm kind of just, again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but how does the depth shake out? Like, how do the pieces move around, and how do Justin Brown? He once he signed with Mississippi State, but they let him out of his letter. He's a guy that I think can make an impact at the safety position. Nico Dowdle, Tay Seymour are other guys that I think could possibly be depth in the for the safeties this year. I know Seymour got on the field a little bit, I think, as a freshman last year, so we'll see what happens there. But again, I think to me that's position all about depth because LaMiles Brooks and Clayton Powell-Lee are like firmly entrenched as the two safeties. And I know Georgia Tech ran a lot of three safety looks last year with King, Powell-Lee, and Brooks. I don't know that they're going to do that as much again, but one of the parts about the spring that I'm anxious to see is just how Santucci just moves all these guys around.
Yeah, and you said completely what I was just about to say. Um, the difference in the defense is going to be a lot bigger than people imagine. Um, Santucci, obviously been an ACC guy, um, has a lot of tools to work with in the secondary. LaMiles Brooks returning is a guy that you can look at to maybe get all conference honors and is probably in that conversation already. Clayton Powell-Lee, the same thing. Um, just looking for a guy to step into King's position last year, which will probably be, I mean, a mix of everybody. But I think this is one of the strongest positions. You return a ton of guys. LaMiles Brooks is great. Clayton Powell-Lee's great. Just, again, like you said, how the depth shakes out below them.
And look, everybody on defense has to be better this year. Yeah. There's no getting around it. Like, they have some talented guys on here, but there wasn't a position on defense last year where, like, man, that guy's just playing so well. Like, it's a shame everybody around him is just playing not well. Like, they were at the bottom of the ACC in nearly every category, near the bottom of the nation in a lot of categories. They did create some turnovers, and I hope that can continue to they can maintain that. But just overall, I think it's pretty easy to say the defense, I think, has a lot more intrigue than the offense. I think the offense is clearly ahead of the defense, but there's just not many positions where you're like, well, I wonder what's going to happen here or who's going to be playing here. Like, I'll just kind of give you a quick summation of my thoughts before we finish up with special teams here. Offensively, I want to see if Leo Blackburn, like what he's doing this spring. That's kind of my number one question. 2 is the running back depth, and 3 is how the tight end room shakes out and how those guys line up. I have all kinds of questions on the defense, like who's going to be the other starter at corner, how the edge rushing position shakes out, how the linebacker rotation shakes out after Eford. Like, I think those are just some of the most intriguing questions that I think you have to ask them ahead of the spring.
Yeah, and I think at tight end on offense you really have a lot of questions. But I think if you had to put like a one position where there's the most room for movement, I think that's I think that edge. So I think that'll be interesting to watch in the spring game. Just kind of interested to see what Brent Key says about the defense, kind of where they're moving guys. Interested to see who plays, who gets a ton of snaps early.
All right, let's talk kickers. I don't have a ton to say here. Like, there's, last year there was kind of, Gavin Stewart finished the 2022 season strong, came into the year as a starter, had some mishaps. Aiden Berg came in and kicked really, really well. Like, he did a really phenomenal job. David Shanahan had a solid season punting. Just keep it up. That's all I can say. It's like they just have to keep it up. Like, there's no question over who's going to start and that kind of thing. But look, at special teams it's critical. Like, people take it for granted until they have a poor kicking game or a poor punting game, and then it's, oh man, I wish we had a better punter. So Tech's got 2 pretty good ones. You got any thoughts on special teams?
Yeah, you said that kind of hit home a little bit. Being a Packers fan,
Oh yeah,
was bad last year. But yeah, I think Aiden Burr's the guy. I'm not a big punt watcher, but David Shanahan is
yes,
pretty good.
I'll say this: like, the special teams had some hits and misses last year. It wasn't perfect. It was so far in a way better than 2022 when they had 4 punts blocked in like the first 4 games. Like, because I think they had like 2 in the Clemson game, something crazy like that. They had one against UCF, one against it was just wild. Just, let's not go back to those days. But yeah, special teams, don't take them for granted. I don't know if you're really going to, because I think at least how most spring games, kickoffs and special teams are not live. Like, they do them, but like there's no tackling, there's no hitting, because obviously like special teams is a place where a lot of injuries can happen. So I was going to like try to sound smart and say like, oh, I wonder what could happen with like the kicking and returning and all that. But I don't know that you're really going to learn that in the spring. So, all right, man, that's, we nearly went an hour. Like, y'all are used to just seeing us for like 20 minutes. Y'all got like twice the treat, nearly 3 times the treat.
Bonus coverage.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge spring. Like, this is probably the most exciting, going into the season for a spring that Tech's probably had in a little bit. Even last year you were like, okay, it's his first season. We'll see how it shakes out. We might be better than some people think, but they wound up being a pretty good football team. Not a perfect one. Like, you still have a lot of things you need to clean up on, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But now you come back with one of the ACC's best offenses, and you're like, hey, if this new coaching staff on defense can shore some things up and some guys can step up at the right positions, like, maybe you're looking at an 8-9 win football team. We'll see. I don't want to get ahead of myself or anything, but it could happen. RJ, any thoughts before we get out of here? Or you're tired and ready to go to bed?
I was just gonna say those Gasparilla Bowl champions are looking scary.
Yeah, that's right. Man, that seems like 20 years ago now. Like, it's been a crazy few months. All right, that's gonna do it for us. A little housekeeping here. We always got to say it, but we appreciate everybody's support. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel first. Drop a like on the video. Help us out there. We love the community we're building here. We love hearing back from you guys. If you're listening on podcast, make sure to leave us a review. We don't care if it's 1 star. Those are just as important as the 5-star reviews, and we want to hear all the good and bad that we do and things that we can improve on. So appreciate all that. Go check out allyellowjackets.com for everything you could want in spring football coverage. Georgia Tech plays Wake Forest tomorrow in basketball. Not really a whole lot can change between now and the end of the season as far as seeding goes. But again, you just kind of want to see continual improvement there. Women's tournament starts on I believe Wednesday, because I believe they play Pitt to open their ACC tournament. So we'll see what happens there. Baseball plays Northeastern tomorrow. So I gave you everything I know off the top of my head as far as athletics goes. But that's going to do it for us here at Bleav Georgia Tech. That's RJ Schaefer. I'm Jackson Caudill. Thank you for tuning in.